So, I think some of the stuff here, it's not going to be particularly earth-shattering, and the Earth's still going to move the same amount that it will anyway, all right? But what I'm hoping to do is maybe just run through a few things, and I'm trying to think of how to deliver things differently, rather than just passively spewing away and hoping the magic retention dust falls from the ceiling and everybody goes away real happy, right? It's sometimes a little bit hard that way. So what I'd like to do, first of all, is just get a little bit of a show of hands. I'm just looking around the room and I see about 3,500 years worth of experience. All right? Some of us are getting a little more snow on the roof. All right? But how many folks have been involved delivering AST programs for 10 years or more? Okay. So, and how about, let's go for that, 5 to 9 year category. A little less, all right. And just for a few years? Okay. And how many are just kind of looking to get started in this thing? Okay, cool. That's great. So a really good mix, right? That's awesome. And so part of what we'll do today is, I look at different ways that I can structure and format my program, my AST programs. We'll touch a little bit maybe on sort of retention, which also leads into a little bit of learning styles. All right, talking a little bit about, the whole less is more concept. We know all of us have taken at least our ITP1. Many of us are level 2, and some are level 3. That's a lot of time studying a phenomena that, is complex and uncertain. If it was certain, we probably wouldn't be here. It'd be pretty easy, I think. And so how do we reduce that to, well, can you tell me what is kind of the average length of an AST1 course? What are we looking at? 16 hours. Yeah, a couple of days. Oh my God. So how much time do we spend studying this thing? Lots. Okay, we'll just go lots, all right? Yeah. So that can be a bit of a challenge for us because we know that some of these phenomena are fairly complex. And we know that there's a lot of interaction with things. And so how do we simplify and reduce and still get the message out? Because what really becomes our crux when we're delivering our program? Time, right? We've got a whole bunch of stuff that we want to do, but we only have so much time, all right? So we'll play with that a little bit, for sure. How many people in here deliver their ASTs primarily with skiing, snowboarding, snowshoeing in mind? That's sort of your prime thing, okay? And how many are sled-oriented? We got a few. Excellent. This is really good. Because that's a world I still need to learn a bit more from, in this. So this is good to have a bit of a mix on that one. Okay? And then at the very end, we'll take a look at, particularly for some of the new folks, where can I get some information? Where do I start putting my course together? How might that look? And maybe we'll pull Nancy up to give us a hand with that one. All right, I've got a few screenshots on that. And we'll kind of go forward from there. All right? Okay. So what do we got here? Let's start off with a little bit of stuff I pulled from the 2014 ISSW, where there was a little bit of a research. There was a presentation on recreational introductory avalanche courses. And some of the feedback, from this study is suggesting that it's, dense, intimidating, there's lots, it's overwhelming. Okay, when you take a look at your level 1 manual and then we reduce it to your ITP1 manual, then down to our instructor manual, and then down to a fairly simplified, concise textbook or handbook. That's quite a chore to kind of reduce that down. Some folks are saying it's too expensive, and these are people that are, I think, just getting started into it. I think once we hook them in our program, we find, at least my partner and I, they're looking for more. They want to go to that AST2 level. Okay. And this is a kind of an interesting notion here where we're talking about complexity and simplifying. Okay, just to help make this thing a little bit more approachable. So how can we do that? Well, one kind of, I would say parallel format or linear is we get our AST instructor manual, all right, and we build a course modules that sort of follow in a parallel fashion or a linear fashion with this manual. So we start off with an introduction, and we go into decision making and human factors, and continue on down. And I think what I found helpful with this is I really spent a bunch of time. Oops, sorry. Let's go back 1, 2, 3. There we go. Breaking down these into modules and creating start and stop points. So that, in other words, I didn't just put this whole thing together and go, well, I know where the next concept is or where the break is gonna be. I kind of identified that for the students, so it didn't look like one massive run-on sentence that I was just taking a breath in, on slide 38 or whatever it happened to be. All right. So this also gave opportunities to ask questions, okay, of people that are taking the courses, because we really want to create some kind of engagement. At least I'm trying to, for sure. And we'll talk about that in just a moment. And so I think for those that are starting, this may be a kind of an easier way to get going, okay? Download the manual, have a look at it, and then just start building your modules. And we know, of course, that these modules interact with each other, don't they? So as we're working through concepts, we're foreshadowing, but we're backlinking, and we're starting to tie things together a little bit. So that's one approach I think that can work fairly well, and been fairly successful using that. And I started to think of other ways as well, and so I'm calling this the hazard risk triangle. Hazard in that these hazard points exist, but risk, once we're in the field traveling, we are something that we don't want to lose or come to harm. All right, so we now then have something like risk. And I do put this model up in my AST programs because, again, I think it kind of compartmentalizes a little bit of where some concepts can be grouped. Okay, some models, all right? Students sometimes like kind of going, okay, I see how this sort of fits. So if we want to break this out a little bit more, okay, I might say, well, under us, okay, the people, well, these are some topics that would fit under that. And these are all coming out of the instructor manual. I'm not making anything up on this one, all right? So what I'm including of this in course with us people is the evaluator. And why do I want to include the evaluator in that one, perhaps? Just 'cause? Yeah, and we want to encourage its use, for sure. I mean, we've heard some conversation on, was that Monday, I believe, in the AST instructors meeting, where we get students using this in our courses, but then it sort of drops off a little bit. So the more I can kind of reinforce referring to it, using it, discussing it, I think there's a little bit more retention with that. So I definitely want to get that going there. Weather and snowpack, again, I'm talking about avalanche basics, formation, and I threw the evaluator back in. Huh, why? Just 'cause? Well, if we take a look at our evaluator, I can't see very well, so I have a big evaluator card, all right? So, again, we're talking about weather and snowpack, and, they are talking about, well, avalanche conditions, which has some weather stuff in there, all right, terrain, so, and snowpack. So we want to keep referring to this as we're moving through our program. Terrain, again, I've got the evaluator back in there as well. Is there something missing that could potentially end up in all three of those kind of grouped headings that's not there right now? The hint is yes. What do you think could end up in all of those? Forecast, yeah, maybe a little bit. We all of this I think we're going to throw the human factor loop, feedback loop back into this as well. Decision making and human factors, right? Sure, we've got weather and snowpack. Well, all right, we might talk about rapid loading, but now we've got that nice bluebird sky day, okay? Could be a few human factors that go off with that. And I've added one category to this whole thing that doesn't necessarily fit in that model, but I've kept it as a separate one intentionally, all right? And that's the whole companion rescue piece. I mean, you could conceivably put that in the sort of the us people category, but I deliberately kept it aside in that when I move forward with this, I want to really talk about prevention with the students. Semantically, we can say mitigation as well. That's a big word for some of my students at the university level still. All right, so we'll just say prevention. All right, and there's a lot of stuff that's going on towards that. And then, of course, we're reacting when something doesn't go quite as we thought it might. All right, we're going to move into another mode to enact a rescue. So this is a concept that I've sort of played with in kind of repackaging, re-saying the same thing. All right, and it's something I've learned at the university over the years is that I kind of need to learn how to say the same thing about 3 or 4 different ways because I have different types of learners. All right. And that's important. And we'll touch on that in a moment as well, for sure. It's like, it's almost like a different English language kind of thing. And sort of an anecdotal story with that a little bit is that we're working on a project with China to have them come over to the university and do some of our adventure stuff. And we want them to meet a very specific English competency level. But yet conversational English is not necessarily English in the game that we play, because do we talk about does conversational English say faceting, and what does that mean? Okay, so we do have a little bit of a language all to our own on this. Whoops, let's go back one. Is there another way that we can structure or format our lessons? What can we use potentially? This is the part where you get to participate. Sorry? Okay, yeah, and we'll get to that as sort of learning styles, which is awesome. But I've had, some folks say, if we want to use this a whole bunch, why don't we kind of model it a little bit after the evaluator? Okay, so that can be. In this presentation, I chose not to because I am going to refer to this a whole bunch, okay, as I work myself through some lessons. All right. So where do we end up here? Now we're talking a little bit about learning and retention of learning, and this is sort of an idea of it, all right, where we have this idea, this notion of, reading, lecture, audio, visual, kind of receiving stuff, okay? We would maybe say that's a little bit more passive, all right, versus something that's a little bit more engaged, where we're participating, we're sort of processing information, all right, and that creates a little bit more engagement, I think. And so if we're thinking about this, this sort of leads to the notion of the types of learners that may exist in your classes. Okay, so thanks, Grant. You sort of started into this. How do we learn? Part of your answers are up there for sure, but so how do we learn? And remember, we're all different. We all have maybe different learning styles, for sure. So what are some of these learning styles that we might have? Totally, auditory, visual, so here we are talking, some people really kind of get that. Visual, we might read, or I can look at diagrams and pictures, okay, those work really well, for sure. Others, again, like I said, this is your cheat sheet up here, but we have, exercises, discussions, and so let's play with the idea of exercises. For those that have delivered AST programs for a while, if you use exercises, what kinds of exercises do you use to kind of create engagement? None? Do you have them look at the bulletin at least? Yeah. Absolutely, right? And so it might be, hey, let's, because we talk about the bulletin, we walk through it and pull up another one from somewhere else and say, okay, guys, tell me a little bit about the bulletin, or you can break into subgroups, and one does, the weather component of the bulletin, the other does the snowpack, and so on, and then start sharing information with that. So something to get kind of the mind engaged a little bit more than just sort of passively absorbing a little bit is kind of what we're after with this, all right? And so this is sort of our crux, I think, a little bit, in that we're looking to help people notice things that they either use or don't use or maybe misuse. And this sort of is working a little bit towards that notion of experiential learning. All right, so how can I create some engagement? And the idea here is, as well, is that we just keep playing with stuff. And don't be afraid to. I mean, I've played with all kinds of things, and I'll say that some have worked really well, and I've had some pretty impressive failures as well, all right? However, you work back on it, and away you go. So the message here is don't think we just have to be linear and just kind of spew things. What I would suggest is that we remove ourselves from here and put ourselves in the audience and go, all right, so how am I receiving that information? What would I really want to get? Or what's my end goal here? And if I reverse engineer this, am I doing it? Okay? So, we'll get there. All right. We've talked a little bit about the less is more. Some of you may have seen this. And do we trickle information into folks and so that they're drinking it and not necessarily having it spray right on past them, okay? And they're going, oh my God. We go back to that first thing where we're saying it's intimidating. There's a whole bunch of stuff. And oh my God, this is the worst experience I ever had kind of thing, all right? I mean, this works well if the kid had a whole bunch of face paint on. That would be appropriate, all right? And then you got to get rid of it. So again, what's our crux? We've got a couple of cruxes here, and I still wrestle with this all the time, right? And that is, we know that this phenomena that we work and play in and are now instructing in, it's complex, all right? And I'm trying to reduce it to 16 hours. Oh yeah, all right? How can I do that? Well, we simplify things for sure. And this is an example of, I would say, something that shows concepts. It also, when used, will show the relationship of concepts and the compounding relationship of concepts quite well. I mean, is everything that we do perfect? The short answer is no, but we can be pretty good at some of this stuff. And I really try to keep pulling this out for the students, because what does this really help them do when they're engaging with this card? They're thinking, but how are they thinking? Critically by looking around. Yeah, so they're becoming a little more spatially aware, okay? Which is really, really useful. They're sort of getting their eyes from just in front of their ski tips to kind of looking around. But then we're going to go a little bit further with that, for sure. All right? So, Cyril, you've heard me do this one a whole pile of times, for sure. All right? So I often go, okay, so what have we observed? Or what is the concept? All right? And observations could be, what might we observe in the field? Just throw out a couple. Heavy loading. Okay, so what? Right? So why is that important? What does heavy loading tell us? Okay? Why is that an important thing? We've drilled it into you in the classroom, so why? All right? So we kind of keep asking, so what? So why is it important? Oh, okay, heavy loading. All right, that's rapid loading, that's rapid change. Okay, things haven't had a chance to kind of settle out yet, and so we go into a little bit of a discussion, right? And then the real important one, I think, is we've got the what and the so. We've got the concept, we've got kind of why is it important. Now, what are you going to do with it? Okay, so this is sort of the action piece. We're really good at concepts, and we're really good at saying, oh yeah, this is what it's going to do, but now what am I going to do? All right, so where do I go? What does it mean? How is it going to affect not only my decision making, all right, but I think more importantly, my actions, okay? And so stories with our wonderful students sometimes as we step out, we've had our little morning conversation, and we've talked about hazards and things we want to avoid, things we're kind of thinking about, and we step out and click into the skis, and they go, can we do that? And I go, everybody back inside, let's start again, all right? Because we just had what go off? A human factor, right? Poof, okay? Which is okay. So when we go back, we kind of rediscuss things, and eventually we get there, for sure. But I kind of use these three questions a lot, okay? Even in concepts in the classroom and in the field in particular, right? Oh, yeah, I see a bunch of snow moving on the surface. I go, So what? It's moving. Maybe it wants to go somewhere. All right? So why? Well, what is it? Well, it's loading. Well, what's the wind doing? And then, we get into the slab concepts and kind of, again, try to cement the links a little bit. The what, so what, and then really important is the now what. What are my actions? What are my decisions? Okay. So here's an example then of stuff, how I'll use something like concepts and the evaluator card embedded in presentations that I do. All right, so here we've got significant loading in the past 48 hours of 30 centimeters. And there's poor Geordie, all right, breaking trail, kind of up towards his hip, and this was really snow over a little less than 48 hours. And we got the evaluator card, all right? And then, I basically highlight it for them here. And what I've observed this for quite a few years now is I watch students as I'm doing this, and they grab their evaluator card and look at it and go, oh yeah, it is there. Huh, interesting. Okay. So making links from these concepts to the card to help them, again, continue to ask questions of the environment around them and then how it might add up in a potential score on this. All right. Another example, convexity. Well, we talk about convexities, right? Areas of tension, all that sort of jazz. Well, again, let's throw it up on the evaluator card and give it a circle, all right? So I'll use this quite often, like throughout the presentations and discussions and so on, and then we may end up with a scenario. And I've used this one intentionally in that you can basically pull most of this slide down from the information on Box. For instructors, it's available. But I kind of tweaked it a little bit, right? So in the corner, I threw in my prompts. Well, what, so what, now what? And I've got a little evaluator card down there to say maybe we should kind of have a look, all right? And then we can describe just about any kind of scenario that you would like to do with this photo. And we might say, well, I'm down here. I want to travel to the top and then come back down. So, what is the information? Well, we're tying in now the idea of the bulletin and the problems, all right, to kind of get a sense of, well, what are we working with out here? And now we've got a terrain shot, and we recognize photos can be a bit challenging. They're two-dimensional. I don't have that third dimension. And we're saying, well, maybe let's just check in with the evaluator here a little bit, all right, with that info. And on this initial one, I may prompt them on it. We talk about it, and we'll highlight it, and we'll say, okay, well, here we are. So I still need to get to this. Now what do I do? Really, because that's really the crux of it at the end of the day. All right, when we're out, touring around and we run into this, skiing with our friends, we're evaluating the conditions and kind of it reduces itself to a question of, well, can I ski it or ride it? All right, and so there's some decision making to be made here, and we might say, well, sure, but there's definitely some places we might avoid, and what might those be and why? Okay, so engaging a lot of more discussion in this is kind of nice. Conditions change, all right? And again, this is a slide that, particularly for the new instructors, that you can pull off of the instructor site on the Avalanche Canada Box site. But again, I've just added a few more things here to kind of engage more discussion and together with tuning into the evaluator card as well. Let's play with that a little bit more. So it's the what, so what, now what, but conditions have changed. And so, it's interesting to watch students go, well, but the hazard was. I'm going, I know it was, but it is. Now this is what we're calling it. So what are you going to do? Right? Well, it's interesting. They're actually fairly conservative in how they sort of step out from this. They're still talking about avoiding very certain terrain features, which I find it offers really good discussion and conversation and linkages towards this. And I try to be the human factor going off. I'm saying, but man, it's moderate, low. Like, let's give her, right? And they're the ones reining me in, which is good. Some other things that I've played with. Actually, I'll back up a little bit, too, in formatting lessons and how we might compartmentalize things. We've got a lot of creative thinkers in the room, and I was really kind of cool to see on Monday afternoon when James and Keith were kind of showing the rough format for the new book. I was like, that's pretty cool. Like, you've kind of recompartmentalized stuff. It's all there, all right? And that's just called, let's get creative with this and how it might flow and link together and become useful for our students, all right? So this is really kind of neat, so don't stop thinking. In Kamloops, I live in an area that I would describe as not a snow belt. Okay, all right, not at all. And yet I'm still trying to do transceiver practice before we head out into the field a little further away. So what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? Well, I can't take credit for this trick at all. This was from, I first was introduced to this from Mark Bender and Kevin Christakos, is I ran out and picked up about 20 or 30 little planters. And this, we won't be able to see it very well here, but I would just scatter them around at the end of a field, and that becomes my avalanche debris. We'll slide a transceiver underneath this, and away we go. We can start walking. So it's kind of hidden. We know where the debris is, okay. And we would often describe that when we're giving, site description to students that are practicing anyway. But I've also found, and I really particularly like it on grass now these days, in that students don't follow tracks, because there aren't any. Okay? So, because we've all seen it, right? They're going, yeah, they're not even looking at anything anymore. They're just looking more at the tracks to where everybody else has been. And I found that's actually been quite helpful for me in introducing transceivers and transceiver searches with that. And again, it's been partly a function of, I'm in an area that just doesn't get a lot of snow in the city, half an hour, 45 minutes away. It's a very different story. But that becomes a time issue for me, all right, in trying to get my lessons done. So, it's a really cool trick. I really like using it, and there you go. That's what I got for you. Some other things I found that have been a bit challenging too is this notion of transceiver interference, and how do I get that message across? We tell students that there's transceiver interference. We tell them about GoPros and cell phones, the passive active stuff as well that we've got. But, it becomes, again, I'm just spewing a little bit. And yeah, okay, there's a couple of little videos that kind of show it and help describe it as well. But I would have to say, I kind of latched onto this a little bit last December when I was shadowing the AVSAR course, and I was going to be tasked with doing a session on transceiver interference that was going to be towards the end of the day, on day 2 or something like that, and it's like, man, these are long days. Like, I got to figure out how to mix this up a little bit and still get my message across. So after day 1, and then sitting in a particular social house and having a couple of pints of creative tonic, I think what we'll call it, is I kind of played with something, and it didn't work perfectly then, but it's going to work a little bit better because I've worked on it. So Nancy, you are going to be a transceiver. Okay, come with me over here, right? You're just going to stand right over here, all right? And as a transceiver that's sending a signal, your signal is, I'm over here. I'm over here, okay? Just nice and kind of quietly, all right? And I'm going to be someone who's searching for you, and I'm going to go way over here, all right? And I'll stand over this way. Now, you guys aren't going to say a word, nothing. You're trying to listen to Nancy say. Nice, good job. You've done that forever, haven't you? Okay, and you guys here, what I want you to do is talk to your partner beside you. Who are you? Where are you from? Do you come here often? All right? Okay, what kind of beer do you like? Where are you staying? All right? You can go then as far as you want into that. We just kind of have a good conversation. Okay, so you can fire it up, but you guys here, I want you to, let's try and listen to Nancy say. Okay, so guys, chat away. Away you go. Huh. So, yeah, don't exchange room keys though, okay, guys? Come on now. That's getting a little bit far. All right? Okay. That's awesome. Okay, so our noise contingent there, we'll just get you to quiet down. We'll unplug you a little bit. And Nancy, keep going. Oh, we've just had interference. So the next step to this, all right, is that I'm far away and there's a lot of interference. how do I now conduct my search? Right? And we kind of know we're going to reduce, okay, the bandwidth in terms of our little zigzags and so on, so we don't trip over something. But in other words, I have to kind of decrease my resolution in order I don't skip Nancy's because of all the noise around me. So that was sort of one way of introducing this idea of interference. But what's one thing that our recreationists, and maybe even some of us, tend to carry a fair bit with them in the backcountry? Besides their phone. Yeah. Good job, Cyril. Your GoPro. Oh. Nancy, you're still going to be a transceiver. I know, you're hired. Curtis, Sledder of the Year. For sure, he got it. It's the word. You're going to be my GoPro. Yeah, come on over here, bud. Let's go over here. Sorry, I'm really hosing this whole camera thing now. Oh well, that's life. Okay, so Curtis is now my GoPro. So let's, Nancy, do you want to turn your transceiver on for a moment? Oh, isn't that great? Mm-hmm. Right, but I'm busy, shredding and shrouping, and what I've done now is I've turned on my GoPro. Go.
Come on, gotta do it.
Yeah.
Gotta do it, you gotta hit it, gotta send it.
Okay.
You didn't bring your sled, so you only get one run today, you dummy.
Okay, all right, awesome. Well, I do bring my sled sometimes. Yeah. So what's happening in this scenario here?
Gotta post your Instagram.
Yeah, I gotta see how many likes I can get. This is really important.
Sponsored.
I know, he might.
Afford a new flannel shirt?
Fully distracted. Yeah, for sure. So then how can we solve this problem in our searching? Turn it. Yeah. So you're right. Technically, yes. Right, so we talk about the distance. Of course we do, right?
Bluetooth is right here.
Yeah. Yeah. So we've got to either turn it off or separate ourselves much more, and away we go, right? So in other words, the whole point of this is to kind of come up with a way of, it was still a little bit passive, right, in how we're describing all this stuff and what it is and how it works, but it became a little bit more engaging, right, than just clicking on a slide, 20 centimeters, 50 centimeters, all that sort of jazz. So a little bit more retention on that one, and folks kind of just sort of breaks it up a little bit, I've found anyway. So that's one little thing I've been playing with. Yeah?
You can do something interesting with the pots and phones and the transceivers too, probably.
Oh, yeah.
Put phones in the same pot and see if it screws it up, or do the one without the phone first, and then if you can get it so it will repeat, then put a phone in there or a GoPro in there with it.
Sure. Yeah, there's a pile. Yeah. Totally, right? I mean, experiment and play with this stuff. Magnets, yeah. So a couple of things to play with on that for sure. All right, thanks transceiver and GoPro. All right, yeah, all right, good. Something I've kind of been playing with a little bit too is how to build a kind of a layer, slab, loose snow simulator. Because sometimes we don't get all that stuff where we need to be. We need to figure it out. It's not, we're still working on this one a little bit. So I've got my snow, got my slope card, which is great. Got my slab. We'll put that off to the side here for a minute. And I recognize we're in a fairly large room. I typically have maybe a dozen students or so fairly small. So this is sort of like, hey, gather around. Let's build some stuff. Let's play, all right? Let's go to the arts and crafts store and see what we can do. Let's make some stuff, all right? And so I've got my, my base layer, all right? Nice, right there. And early season, we're going to call this a dump of snow. And that's exactly how it snows, right? Yeah, not in Kamloops. All right. And what do we often get in the end of November, or end of October, early November? Okay. We need a, yeah, oh no, this was my, oh no, this is the crust I'm gonna use. Okay, let's make one of those. So we make a little layer like that. Okay, awesome, real good. And you know, I might say, okay, it's gonna snow some more, all right, so I'm gonna throw another little dump of snow on here. And we might say, all right, we're gonna get another, whoops, I'm attached to everything here, geez. Another layer up top, all right? And what I wanna simulate with this a little bit is the idea of loose snow. Okay, and yeah, we show slides of this sort of stuff, but I'm getting tired of showing slides of that stuff. So I'm gonna make it snow. And this stuff is really cool. This is heavily rhymed. Size 10 snowflakes, right? It only happens, you get those, it snows like that in the craft store. All right. And then what's kind of cool is I got, folks in kind of nice and close having a look at this, and I've got my little slope angle chart, right? And what I've done is I've really darkened it up between 30 and, what's the magic number? 37.5, yeah, okay. Well, between 30 and 45 here. So this is kind of really sort of important for us on that one. And then, if I'll do this on the side so you can kind of see here a little bit with this loose snow thing, I got to get this up on the surface here. Oops, and then give it a little bit of a tilt, and they'll start to see the loose snow kind of go at around 30 degrees. Well, how cool is that? Right? Magic. No, it's not. And so what I need to do now is say, okay, well, that's a bit of the loose stuff. How do we get a slab? So we're talking about layers here, and we're saying, well, what do I need on top of what on top of what? There you go. You need a hard layer on a soft layer on a hard layer. Cool. So I've got my hard layer here. I'm going to leave this down as a soft layer. And what I've tried to use this stuff as to simulate facets and surface horror. And these are little styrofoam balls. And they work really well, but they seem to have a bit of a charge to them. So they'll go and go take off while you're like, they don't do that. Okay, they really don't do that. Okay. Yeah, that's not how it works. All right. So I've kind of put those aside for now, and I'll have to kind of continue to play and experiment in the old craft room there. And I'm going to build a little bit of a slab thing here. Okay, it's sort of pre-cut out. Yeah, I know it's cheating a little bit. But again, it's the idea. What did we notice with our loose snow avalanche? It just sort of trickled down, hey? And we're going to get this guy here. We've got our hard layer, a soft layer, and we've got a hard layer there. Cool. I'm not really talking about triggers yet, but we could. And then I kind of give this guy a tip, and at 30 degrees, my slab pulls out. Sick. And now we can sort of get into describing the crown, the flanks. Can't get a good, stock wall on this thing yet, but, that's maybe a work in progress in the old craft shop. But just trying to find another way of engaging students in kind of how this thing works. Because right now we can talk about all kinds of things with this model, the slope angle stuff, okay, the hard layers, the soft layers. We can start talking about how things can eventually settle out a little bit. Let's get rid of our soft layer, all right? And I think what we notice with this is that my slope angle is actually, it's going to increase a little bit before this guy peels out. So I'm going a little bit further. Go, bam, okay? So time, all right, as these things start to heal up. It's not quite done yet, but this thing's, it's kind of a bit of a work in progress. We're playing with it, and I've just found that people get a little bit more engaged with this as opposed to just pumping stuff out, okay? Which is not bad, because one of the advantages with us in delivering concepts in a passive format, in other words, I speak, you listen, is that I have a lot of control over the clock. Okay, I can kind of keep it moving, make things happen. When we start to engage a little bit more, we get questions, and I always like questions for sure. But if we have exercises or students doing anything, we may end up seeing that our clock is running away on us a little bit. So the message there is that you can still do those things, but you just sort of know when to start saying, hey, we've only got a couple more minutes, or whatever it happens to be, right? Kind of keeping control of that. Anybody played with any other kind of tricks out there? These are just a couple. It's my Slab-O-Matic. This is like I'm at the home show, right? Yeah, yeah. These are all on sale. Well, they're not on sale, but I will take your credit card. Okay. All right. Any other kind of tricks that we've played with or have played with that have kind of worked for you, or no?
Use a drawing exercise for common terms and the way we speak to each other, but without preparation, it's possible to share.
Yeah, sure.
It's interactive and it's funny and it allows people to really understand why we need to understand supersonic slabs. Anything you can do just like that to get people visual, talking, understanding the concept without you just telling them why.
Sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I found with this one, they're really starting to remember the concept of slope angle and why that's kind of important. Yeah. Cool.
This is for the AST too, but we take the 8 ratings with the 3 terrain ratings and all the factors that are included. There's sort of a whole page. I cut them all up into a big puzzle pieces and then
Nice.
give small groups all these pieces, and they've got to put the whole 8 ratings all together. And so they're talking about what's that signal? What's the glaciated over?
Yeah.
They just work on it together, and they're just looking at all the concepts, trying to figure it all out.
Totally, totally. I think that's awesome. Yeah. So what we're getting here is just creative ways of engaging, all right, which is really good. And that's sort of, again, leading a little bit towards that notion of, the idea of experiential education. And so we go to the great minstrel philosopher, Jimi Hendrix, after our experiential session, and he's going to ask, "Are you experienced?" All right. I just had to do that. Okay. So, as I mentioned at the beginning, I've had some things that just haven't gone the way I planned them to go. All right. And it's like, oh, well, now what? What do I do? All right. Well, part of it is recognizing it. Okay. And if something's going in a direction that is maybe not going to underscore the concept that you intended, but it will another, I let it go. All right, and I'll hit that one. And in my mind, though, I'm kind of recalibrating of how to get to the other one, with another exercise. But if it's going to go completely off the rails and not really touch on anything that we're really interested in, then I might, and I can see this happening, we'll step in and go, okay, and we'll either add an element or take an element away to kind of help redirect the ship a little bit so that I end up somewhere where I need to be, and then can pull it back in with the discussion and the debrief on that. So the message with this is, if you're going to do those sorts of things, you need to know it, troubleshoot it, and I would say become, an 18 or 19-year-old male, all right, and work backwards from there, kind of thing. And as I said, just kind of reverse engineer it a little bit, because I've had some pretty good failures for sure, all right. But just know the stuff, definitely, all right. So the Yoda message, all right, particularly for the new folks, right, and by no means am I saying that I'm a master at this, I'm not even close, but I've had a lot of failures on concepts or things that I've tried to do, both with AST stuff and in my university thing, but I learn from it, and I refine it, and I get it better. Interference simulation wasn't quite that good the first time I did it, all right? But then you recognize, what do I need to do to make it better, right? And away we went. So how we split the room up and where you place people, etc. And the message: don't be afraid to make mistakes. Keep them as small as you can, of course, and learn from them and move forward. It's not a big deal, really. Okay. All right. Any other questions or comments on this first part that we went down? I think we're down to about 10 minutes or so. That's right. Getting closer to IPA time. Okay, got it. All right. So as we mentioned at the instructor meeting on Monday, where do you get this stuff? Well, once you become registered with Avalanche Canada and with Nancy here, there's the box.com site is really a good place for you to get started building your course. The question that we do sometimes get, and Nance, maybe you can verify this, is that, people ask, well, do you have a course, a presentation that I can use? And the short answer is no, there's parts of it. And that's by design for two reasons, actually probably more than that. And one is we're all a little bit different on how we like to deliver things, and we may have different audiences. And I've got a few different presentations depending on the audience that I have. All right, so that's one. And the other is we really want you to put your personality into it. We don't need a room full of robots. Okay, so in other words, you're going to put your little flavor into, and nuances into the course presentation that you have, and you'll own it. It's yours, all right, because you know what it's all about. So when you go onto the box.com site, you end up with a whole bunch of files here, and of course the read me first would suggest to read me first. Okay, but what we're going to do is just drill into this AST1 a little bit. All right, and when we do that, we have an image database, an instructor's manual, okay, and what else do we have in here? The French and youth. Okay, that's great. So we're going to drill a little bit further into the AST1 image data set, and what we end up with are, these are all PowerPoints, is that right, Nance? Yeah, thanks. And they're really bare bones skeleton stuff, and it's really there to offer you some parts and maybe a framework from which you're going to take your color palette and start filling it in, all right? And you're going to make it yours, all right? I've watched, people that have helped me with mine that don't know how I guess I think is one thing, and they sort of stumble through some parts of my presentation, but when you do your own, you know it, all right? And you know where you move a little quicker, you know where you spend a little bit more time, all right, and you kind of hit the highlights on that. So this is the important one, and I think what's useful about this is, it's not a make-work project for you, but you're going to know the material, all right, that you are going to deliver, rather than just having it presented for you to deliver, because you will get questions, all right? We have a lot of different people that take our courses, some that are just kind of passively interested, and some that are asking some pretty detailed stuff, right? And we have those chats on the side. So that's the benefit of building it, is that you've got to go through the manual, go through the books, and kind of build it and make it your own. And draw in from other resources. I think there's another image file in there, is that right? Where we have, videos. Yeah. So we use a lot of videos and things as well to talk about what went well and what would you do a little bit different, okay, those sorts of things as well. And I spend a ton of time just scanning the YouTube stuff at the beginning of the season, because there's no end of stuff that gets put up. And one of the advantages with all this stuff, sources that are online, is that there's lots of it. And one of the challenges is that there's lots of it. Okay, so you need to have a couple hours to burn, right, to really kind of drill in and find what you want and what's going to be useful and how you're going to embed it into your courses. The final thing, we've just got a few minutes here, is this notion of instructor development, and that every fall we run instructor PD sessions as well. Is that right, Nats? Thanks. Yeah, and so these are now becoming available in different formats, the face-to-face, of course, and there have been PD sessions that have been done as webinars, which is really good. And this allows, those of us that are farther away and it's more challenging to do the face-to-face thing to still become engaged, in an online kind of session like that. So stay tuned for that stuff as Nancy puts the schedule together for this upcoming fall and kind of the early season stuff to get us primed. And away we go. The other thing that we will be playing with, again, for those that were at the Monday instructor session, is maybe putting together, or we will be putting together, a section on the box site that has the updates. And how many of us sat in here for the AVSAR thing earlier today? Yeah, it was really good. Pretty revealing, right? It's like, yeah, that's what's going on. Okay, so just little updates like that, so that we're all kind of on a similar page, I think, with techniques and so on. So again, working to have more resources to help support what it is that you do, right, or that we do, right? So keep it the world-class program that it is. So good work on your part. Questions? Comments? Answers? Right. Okay, well. I think we should go crack a beer. Good, thanks.